And welcome back to Spiritual Strength, Eating Up Minds. Today I'm here with the great Mike, of course, man who needs no introduction in the world. Thank you very much for being with us, Mike.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate being here. Thank you. Not great, by the way. Just Mike.
Well, I appreciate your time. So let's kick things off with some positivity. What can Catholics be hopeful for right now?
Heaven. Heaven. Yes. That no matter what happens here, you stay faithful. You persevere to the end. You get the crown. If you're asking temporally, what can be hopeful for, that you get to fight for the crown. There you go. And it's going to be a fight. You can't look, you cannot survey the current situation right now, culture, church, everything, and not approach this in the most sobering way that you can. There is, civilizations, no civilization has ever been promised it would last forever. Even the church, in various locales around the world, was never promised that it would last forever. The church as a whole obviously was, and that's a divine promise we have from our Lord. But if you go look at the first couple chapters of Revelation, St. John's Apocalypse, those seven churches, the seven lampstand churches mentioned there, every one of them was eventually overrun. Even some of them at the moment that our Lord was appearing to them, he was praising them and saying, you're doing a good job keeping the faith, that sort of thing. But every one of them's gone now, because they were either overrun militarily, spiritually, whatever. So I think probably the major cause, and this is, I don't mean to sound all gloom and doom and all of that sort of thing, but when you look out around the world, what do you see? Within the church, I mean, specifically, what do you see? You see a bunch of people who just simply don't understand what spiritual warfare is all about. They are not prepared. And it's not just they're sort of sitting in the stands watching like Notre Dame play Southern Cal and just they're kind of undecided, or just sort of not cheering, or they're a little disengaged from it. They're actually on the side of the wrong team. These are Catholics. Many Catholics who go to Mass. The ones who don't go to Mass are already gone. I mean, they're just write them off. As far as coming to life in the spiritual war. But even the ones who go to Mass, how many of them don't believe in the real presence? How many of them don't accept all the church's teachings? How many? It has been a devastation, unparalleled in the church's history, an apostasy against virtually everything the church teaches, that they're concerned about. Nobody's taken to the streets over whether Our Lady died or just fell asleep and then assumed. Nobody's having wars over that because they don't care. They're having wars over, however, war in the form of rejection of the church's teaching over every single sexual moral teaching that there is, and half the regular teachings as well. What do we have to look forward to and hope for? Heaven. If it was 1950, maybe I'd answer the question a little bit differently, but it's not 1950, it's 70 years hence. And here we are. It's an entirely different world that, as far as an arena in which to help evangelize by word and deed and bring people to the truth, is becoming more and more closed in. And I really don't see how at least a soft persecution isn't in the very near future. And in some cases, you already see it. Like Tim Gordon, for example, a great Catholic guy, family man, husband. Got fired from his job at a Catholic school in the diocese of Fresno, in Bakersfield. Got fired because he happened to make some comment on social media about Black Lives Matter, being a terrorist organization, and the atmosphere has been poisoned from within the church, and now has spread outside the church against the church. So if somebody doesn't understand that, they will fall. Because it will come to them. There's that old expression, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. So you better be ready for when the war winds up on your battlefield, right on your front porch, because it's coming if it isn't already there.
That's excellent. Yeah, my dad always said, to be a leader, you need to know the way, show the way, and go the way. So you need to know the way. Do you even know the faith? And one of the big things that helped me in my reversion back in 2015, was cradle Catholic, did the consecration to the Blessed Mother, came back into the faith. One of the first things I watched were your videos on apologetics, explaining the faith very clear, to the point. I said, wow, this makes all the sense in the world. So it starts with knowing the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to know, there's it's not just a list of intellectual propositions. There's that in a narrow way of looking at it, there certainly is that. I mean, you have to, the church has a list of things to, for you to understand and grasp, why did God make me? The Baltimore Catechism. I mean, that's a list of things, but it's, if you look at it just from an intellectual, okay, I understand that I got the answer right in the multiple choice test in Sister Bernadette's class and all that, that's fine. But the reason you learn it intellectually and know it more is that in the knowing it more, you come to love it. And if you don't, you can't love what you don't know. So it doesn't mean that knowledge of something is a guarantee that you'll love it, but it is the other way around. If you don't know it, you can't love it. So, Christ is present in his teachings, in in the way the church speaks. That's Christ's voice speaking. So, if you hear that voice, as he's standing in front of Pilate, he says, "Anyone who hears the truth hears my voice." So, if you won't hear the truth, then you can't hear his voice, and there's just so many Catholics today, including many in mitres and many with collars on, who will not hear the truth. It goes against whatever it is, their own personal reasons for rejecting it, whether it's psychological, sexual, financial, whatever. I mean, check all the boxes. There's some combination of it for, virtually all of them. They've neglected to teach the truth for 50 years, 60 years now. And you're seeing the results of it. All this stuff unfolding in the world is what you see right now. Not just the riots per se, but I mean some of the insane, I don't want to call them intellectual propositions because that's an insult to the intellect. But these things that are just proposed for you to think about, like defunding the police or something, or these sorts of things. They become insane, like intellectually unstable, because they have moved away from truth. They've moved away from truth because they've moved away from Christ. Even on a natural law level. I mean, I've got to imagine somewhere out in America where there's, whatever it is, 16% or something of the population identifies as either atheist or, indifferent to religion or irreligious, or the nuns, no religion or whatever. I've got to imagine there's some people out there who just have natural virtue who go, really? You're going to get rid of the police department? That's stupid. They don't have to be going to mass and, confession and, receiving Holy Communion and everything to understand that's stupid. So, you start to fall off the cliff intellectually. When your soul becomes darkened in sin, you start to not only lose the supernatural powers of the intellect, you begin to eventually lose the natural powers of the intellect as well, as the Supreme Court did yesterday in its it's a gay equals sex whatever ruling at the the 6-3 vote. So yeah, it's a the only reason I talk like this is to make sure that people understand the times we're in, understand where we are. And in the case of St. Thomas More, I'm sure many of your people have seen the movie A Man for All Seasons, or at least familiar with the story. After sort of the overthrow and he had to resign his office and all that as Lord Chancellor of England, he was convinced that if he just stayed silent, things would be okay. And there's a scene in the movie anyway that depicts him, with his wife, and she says, oh, well, you're not going to tell me, why you're silent. He goes, no, it's not it. It's not it. In silence is my defense. That's true. And he said, if I just sit here silent, if we just hold our tongues and sit here, everything will be fine. Well, no, it won't be fine. It's fine for a moment, brief period, while the forces of evil are kind of collecting and gathering themselves and organizing and trying to figure out how to advance on this broad front. But once they get their momentum going, they're not going to let you stay silent. They want you dead. They want you dead. They don't want opposition. They're the tolerant crowd is the least tolerant crowd in human history. So they won't let you sit silent. You might be able to get away with it for a little bit, like I said, but at some point you're going to have to declare one way or the other in different places and circumstances and whatever. You are going to have to declare your allegiance to the God of the state or to the authentic God, one or the other. There's going to be no escaping it for anybody. It will come, and it'll come much sooner, I think. Looking at current events, I've always sort of had a hunch that this would happen. Never did I think it would happen at this kind of speed. So, let me give a proposition for some of your listeners out there, some of your viewers. If you are working at a company, okay, you're a Catholic guy, you're working at some firm somewhere, maybe an accounting firm. Those are somewhat apolitical. Numbers are usually somewhat neutral. You're just sitting there doing your thing. You're a clerk in an office doing whatever it is. You're making your $50,000 a year and you got your 5 children or something. And then your HR guy sends out an email, which you're in the group, and says that we're refashioning everybody's hiring statement, and here are some various things. We just need to sign them so we can tell the world that we're in favor of gay rights and this and that and everything else. So all of you, please stop in my office before noon on Thursday and just sign your new hiring agreement and whatever. What do? No Catholic who wants to go to heaven can sign that, and you're done. You can call in sick on Thursday. You can pull a Thomas More, take a vacation for a week. You can do something for a little bit, but eventually, again, because you may not be interested in war, you may even try to avoid war, but war's going to find you. It's interested in you, and it needs you to submit. That's the point. You need to submit, like the early Christians. They didn't say, it's okay if you don't offer incense to the gods, but just don't go around saying that others shouldn't. Everybody, come throw your pinch of incense into the gods. And that's absolutely going to be the case here. You can see it already developing. It's already happening in some places. Ask Tim Gordon.
Yeah. And we know from Scripture that for everything there is a season, everything there is a time. Maybe there is a time to be silent, and then there's a time to speak. And a lot of times we have the mistake that we're silent when we're supposed to speak, and we speak when we're supposed to be silent. Can you offer some tips to the viewers about when it's good, when it's healthy to be silent, and when it's unhealthy too?
Well, I'm probably not the guy to ask when is it healthy to be silent.
Me either.
I'm probably the last guy anybody wants to hear from on that, because I have absolutely zero street creds when it comes to saying, "Oh, shut up." That's fine. But if you're going to sit there and say, maybe, I think one of the great tragedies of the church in really the last century, but particularly sort of on steroids in the last half century, is this push to sort of see things as very like, well, calm down, take a breath, be prudent, be prudent, be prudent, be prudent. And prudent has been prudence. The word and the advice to be prudent has been sort of co-opted, and the definition has been, actual definitions have been sort of flushed away and has been substituted with the idea of like, shut up, don't make waves. That is not what prudent means. The very thing that you just said is prudence. Sometimes you're silent and sometimes you're not silent. Well, what dictates which you should be? Which your reaction should be, what your reaction should be. Well, it's the circumstances. So is it prudent if you see a fire coming out of the attic of a house, like blazing out the windows? You don't say, well, shh, that might upset the neighbors. The people inside, they might, they're probably enjoying a nice night's sleep. You're going to like rouse them and scare them and stuff like that. So don't say anything. Shh. No, the prudent thing, prudence, the virtue of prudence there would dictate screaming your head off, blowing your horn, getting a bullhorn, those things, everything. Wake up, wake up, wake up. That's prudence is just responding correctly to whatever the circumstances are, that you respond according to the circumstances. Well, I don't know how much more worse things have to get for a Catholic to be able to say, I need to raise my voice right now. I mean, the corruption in the hierarchy from top to bottom throughout, the corruption in the clerical ranks, the victims of these people, and there's of course the sex abuse victims themselves, but there's the shattered lives around those people. One of the things we do here at Church Militant, because we talk to so many victims, whether they're priest victims or victims of like bad bishops, or the sort of the zeitgeist of the chancery, or whatever it is, or they're people, parents who none of their children go to mass anymore, they don't believe anything anymore. They're victims. Children are victims, certainly adult children are victims, but the parents are. I mean, their hearts are breaking for their families, and they should. You get to sort of walk away with the faith and have no consequences from it. So all of these people, are victimized. How a Catholic can seriously consider that he or she has no duty to raise his voice or her voice on behalf of the victims, to me is just, I mean, you stand in front of God how you think you're going to stand in front of God, but I tell you how I'm going to stand in front of him. I'm just going to load it with sin and all that. Yeah, but I will not be able to say I didn't try to speak up for these souls. I maybe didn't do the best job of it at times. I maybe didn't, say everything maybe that I should have thought I said. I don't know, but as far as the, here's what I tried to do to help them here temporally, and most importantly spiritually, to get to heaven. There it is, our Lord, you judge it. But I mean, somebody who sits there and thinks they can keep their mouths shut, or their first response is always, well, say something maybe later. Well, guys, it's like the 11th hour right now in the 59th minute. I mean, do you think the clock just sits there, just, time just stands still for you while you finally get to a comfort zone where you get to say something? I remember the very first time I said, I wrote in a vortex that many of these bishops are homosexual and they've lost all supernatural faith. They no longer believe the faith. I couldn't believe the words are coming out of my mouth, but that's what it is. So, they can sit there and be, oh, you're mean, and yeah, whatever, big deal. Been called mean lots of times. So you got to say what you got to say. The victims deserve, spiritual victims, everything, deserve a voice. And many of them are so shattered, so hurting, so confused. They don't exactly know what happened. They look around and like, what? They don't know. They just don't know. Some of these, young guys commit suicide, shattering their parents' lives even further. I mean, it just goes on. The ripple effect of the evil, particularly the unopposed evil, is just so overwhelming to so many people that how anybody can go up to Holy Communion and receive the body and blood of Christ and think that they don't have an obligation to speak up for these people is beyond me. I will never compute. Never, ever, ever will that make sense in my head, ever. So I think it's an abnegation of every single moral duty of loving God and loving your neighbor. I don't see another way you could make that offend those two commandments, the two greatest commandments, than to refuse to stand up for a victim. You take that to your judgment. Good luck.
Right. And I like how you said about the spiritual victimhood. Of course, there's both, and both are terrible. Physical victimhood, terrible. Spiritual victimhood, terrible. And we've been seeing a lot of this since Vatican II, pretty much, where Catholics aren't even aware of what they don't know and how much they've been abused and deprived of our beautiful tradition.
Yeah, there is a depravity which results in deprivation. And that's what this is, really. There's such a depravity, which is a deprivation turned ugly on the part of so many of the ordained and consecrated, that has wound up or ended up in a deprivation of the truth and the beauty of it and all of that. Life's tough enough. I can't remember who he was, but the old time rocker said, "Life's so tough, no one gets out alive." Um, Life's tough enough, but to deprive somebody of the spiritual strengths, the spiritual weapons to be able to slog your way through it. And let's face it, everybody slogs their way through at least part of life. You have to. Um, that to deprive somebody of their ability to be able to sort of fight at least a decent fight. Even if the battle does rage, like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, every now and then or something. Even if that's the case, you to deliberately make the choice to take the weapons, spiritual weapons, psychological weapons, out of somebody's hands. Never put them in their hands. What a monstrous betrayal of truth and justice that is. It's horrible. So yeah, it's let's just say it this way. I can understand why St. Nicholas went and decked Arius. I get it.
Well, the righteous indignation there. And it seems like there are a lot of Catholics that are waking up after the whole Pacha, whatever its face is called, and the documents that have been released and things that have been said by our highest shepherds. And now people are at the point where a lot of Catholics are starting to get mad. These very same Catholics who maybe 5 years ago were saying, "Oh, look at Michael Voris's tone is, I don't like his tone. His tone is, that kind of thing."
Yeah,
And now they're starting to sound maybe a lot more like you 5 years ago, and maybe in the past. I remember like kind of the word on the street about 5 years ago. You'd be talking to other Catholics, and then you start talking about some of the abuses, and then someone says, "Oh, I saw this on Church Militant," like kind of quiet. And then you're like, "Do you watch Church Militant?" "Yeah, I watch Church Militant." High five. Nowadays, it seems like this is where Church Militant is where Catholics go to get the ordinary news. So
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of a shift with that because, and you got to that point faster than we did because you've been in the game a lot longer,
Yeah.
and you're sick of the garbage, of all the crap that you've been seeing for years and years. Maybe I'm seeing it for the first time for only about 2 years.
Right. No, I think that's true. Look, when and a good example of that is just when we started St. Michael's Media in 2006, well, really the very end of 2005, but kind of got it up and going in public in 2006. The first 3 years, we shot our very first One True Faith episode the first weekend of May in 2006, and for 3 years, that's all we did. It was One True Faith episodes and talking about the faith and some of the apologetics classes you mentioned earlier that you'd seen, where all that stuff was shot then and produced then. But go fast forward 3 years to May again of 2009, and that's when Obama went to Notre Dame and for the commencement address, and that was really the lights on moment. Maybe it's because I went to Notre Dame and I was just so intensely sort of drilled into that story. I don't know, but I had kind of for the first 3 years not really paid much attention to, and partially because I didn't realize there was as much attention that needed to be paid to the whole corruption within the hierarchy, how they were corrupting the faith and destroying souls. That hadn't sort of got on my radar yet. There were like little blips here and there, little like warning blips, like, that's a strange signal there on the radar. But I hadn't connected any dots. I hadn't seen enough dots or anything. But that was really the eye opener. There were, if you count all the auxiliary bishops and all the retired bishops at the time in the U.S. in 2009, there were 400 bishops. The 194 ordinaries and whatever. I think it was like 120 auxiliaries and then a bunch of retired bishops. I thought, wow, how could 400 bishops and only 80, whatever it was, 85, 86 of them actually objected to that's less than a quarter. So 80% of the U.S. bishops didn't have a problem with a man who's like the baby killer in chief standing at a university named after Our Lady, not just giving a speech. That was horrible enough. But to stand there and have the honors of, the symbol of our Blessed Mother draped over his shoulders to honor him, I about came out of my skin. And I remember that drive back. I've said this lots of times. Remember that drive back from South Bend that Sunday late afternoon, and I was it was all processing in my head. For those 3 years, I'd kind of put my journalistic Voris stuff aside because now it's just apologetics and faith and explanations and writing skills and all that sort of stuff. But they came back on. They fired back up from 0 to 100 on that ride back from South Bend here to Detroit. And I went, wow. And I remember talking to a couple of friends, one in particular, and I just set on a phone call a couple days later because it's just eating at me. It's just eating at me. And I kind of looked around and I said, let me check some stuff out here. And the more I checked out, the more I saw that the church was just nothing more than, in the States anyway, it was nothing more than a paper tiger. It's complete paper mache. There's nothing to it. And it was really then that I just said, So, and I was talking to somebody on the phone, a supporter of ours on the phone. I said, let me run something by you. My thought is that most of these bishops no longer believe the faith, or at the very minimum, most of them don't have a sufficient enough belief in the church and its teachings to make any significant impact. What do you think about that? I said, you know what? I've never thought of it like that, but yeah, I think that's probably a good working hypothesis. And then we went around and looked at the, McCarrick and Wilton Gregory lying about the reception of Holy Communion back in 2004, and Donald Wuerl saying, well, I wouldn't make, communion at the rail, the litmus test, and, well, you do it every day. What are you talking about? And that's just before, this was all Benedict was still Pope. Nobody even heard of Pope Francis yet. Still 4 years to go before that would happen. And, and it was just very clear. You looked at the whole, just sort of the whole meltdown of the church across the board, and start reading some saints and fathers and doctors of the church, and they're talking about sort of putting the idea firmly out there that there is one bulwark against evil in the world, and it's the Catholic Church. Because humanity has no power within itself to resist the evil. Eventually you will fall. And so if our Lord came to establish the church to be the way out of the evil, eventually to heaven, but along the way to fight the evil, the church militant, not this place, but the church militant, which we are proud to be a part of, if that is failing in its mission, well, then evil wins. And talking to people's individual lives and situations. Looked around, went, yep. Let me look around the world here. Yep, this is not even close. Are there little individual examples of things that are good? Of course there are. But, there's no such thing as total evil. That philosophically is not possible. But you're talking about a degree here. We're in the fourth quarter, and there's maybe 3 or 4 minutes left in the game. And I don't know how you come back from 6 or 7 touchdowns down with 3 or 4 minutes left. Can you? Yeah, I don't know how. You'd have to score, within, 2 snaps of every possession, and you'd have to have like 12 timeouts, and you'd have to intercept or force a fumble every single time the other guy had the ball. The other team had the ball, and recover it and run it in for a touchdown. So right. Is it theoretically possible? Sure. But speaking from a strictly temporal standpoint, I think the emphasis needs to switch from, we'll see what happens with the election outcome, because that matters. But I think people need to begin, Catholics need to begin, people of all goodwill really, but specifically Catholics, need to start thinking in terms of, what is my responsibility to God in these times? Not how am I going to hold on to my job, or how am I going to hold on to my investment, or anything like that. How is this going to happen? Catholics are being brutalized in China right now. We're releasing a story tomorrow on our latest update on it. They're going around telling, elderly Chinese, take those pictures down of Jesus in your house. They're going into your house. Communist Party going to your house saying, take those pictures of Jesus down, put up a picture of Mao, or just going to cut off their version of Social Security. And that's done, you're done. Well, I mean, imagine being an 83-year-old little old lady, and they come in and say that to you. So what do you can't physically defend yourself. You can't do anything. And that's why they're targeting the little old people, defenseless people. I mean, I think of my dad, a couple of years before he died, those last couple of months, he was pretty fully dependent on me. And I think to myself, my gosh, what a horror that would be, to be his age and just in the house by himself, and some big, mean, monstrous, thugs kick in the door and say, put that rosary down, throw that rosary in the toilet, and, or we're going to cut off your way to live. So people don't think this can happen here. And they're out of their minds if they don't think this can happen here. Of course it can happen here. Human nature is no different in the United States than it is over in communist China. You just need the right circumstances, aligned the right way at the right time, and anything can happen. So what other cheery things do you want to talk about?
No, you hit on so many good points about how making sure we make the most important thing. Looking back at the history of the church, how did the fathers handle it? How did the saints handle it? And there was that righteous indignation. Even Christ driving the people out of the temple, making a whip. I heard from the pulpit a priest say he was clobbering people. So yes, so it was we look to history for that, and sadly my favorite college football team, shame on old Notre Dame, right? Terrible.
Horrible. I do have to say, so people won't question, I mean, full disclosure, I still can't get the Irish out of my head when it comes to football season. Sorry, since I was this tall, I get it.
We get the Zanettis understand that completely, but but shame on the ideals. So
yeah.
You're going to do there. But again, I think you've just reached that point of I'm done with the crap. I'm done with all the garbage, and now it's time to fight. And all of us are maybe called to fight in a different way. Some people more in the public eye, some just in their family, some maybe writing a letter to the bishop. I don't know, whatever they could do your little part. But it's time to take up arms and fight. I mean, we are the church militant.
Yeah, it's very true. The idea that you just get to sort of sit back and not really say anything anymore, or just worry about picking your words so carefully, and don't want to give offense and all that sort of thing. I mean, really? Have you listened to the other side for more than 15 seconds? The idea of, and I'm not saying that we should stoop to their level as far as like disrespecting people and using vulgarity and spray painting on the F-bomb on the side of Planned Parenthood or something. I don't mean that, but you got to call it what it is. It's baby killing, and these guys are they're ruthless. Planned Parenthood just put out a tweet this morning that they're going to give 50% discount on abortions for all black women because of Black Lives Matter. I mean, well, are you just trying to finish killing off the whole rest of the black race? I mean, you already killed 40% of all the black pregnancies. I mean, how many more do you have to go through? Yeah, I mean, what people have to realize, if you think back to our Lord in the garden, there's the horrible agony and the sweating of blood, and all that and everything. That was not, I'm sure it was part of it, but the focus of that was not the great fear of what was going to happen to him the next day. As dreadful as that is, I mean, crucifixion was a horribly ugly, on purpose meant to be the most painful way you could die. But beyond that, I mean, our Lord was not just a human being, he was also God, and he had the vision of God, although Father James Martin doesn't seem to think he knew he was God. He wasn't quite sure. Sometimes he was, sometimes he wasn't. Yeah, kind of, a bit of a schizophrenic God. And but when he was there, essentially crawling on the ground and sweating blood, I can't remember which father it was, but Bishop Sheen quotes him and says that when he was consumed in his agony, it was because he had prayed to the Father, as we know, 3 times, don't let this happen, And he sort of turned, as Bishop Sheen sort of paints the picture, he turns and he looks off to the side expecting some measure of comfort. And what he saw was the jaws of hell yawning open, and all of the humans that he was about to undergo this passion for tomorrow who would still reject it, still falling into hell. And, that's got to be, how, and he would have seen it with the mind of God, the vision of God, and all the horror that would have inflicted on his soul, to see that even in this great act of love he was about to do, that most people would say, I don't care, and would be damned for all eternity because of it. And it's like, when you think on that level, the intensity of the spiritual battle we're in, and we don't understand 1/100 trillionth of it. We can't. But he saw it all. He saw it all in one instant. The whole raging battle and the power of evil and Satan and all. We look at some of these, some YouTube video or something on Twitter or whatever of a guy, as horrible as it is, he's on the street defenseless, and some, a bunch of gang members or something, like, kicking him in the head or, whatever. And you're like, ooh, that's horrible. I mean, multiply that times, I don't even know what factor you would use, trillions. And that's just temporal. That's not the eternal, the supernatural. So, you really, it becomes very daunting when you think about, I've never gotten into any deep discussions in here with people about it on any sort of consistent basis, certainly, but I'm sure lots of times you just leave here, and I'm sure other places, other faithful apostolates around the country, just leave and go, you know what? Just need to unplug for a moment. This is too overwhelming to think about, or to even consider. You don't really unplug, you just sort of consciously unplug. It's still playing in the back of your mind. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible time in which we live, and the ascendancy of evil right now, and all that goes along with that, the uncertainty. I mean, does anybody really think that they can say with some degree of certainty, a solid degree of certainty, what their Christmas plans are this year? No, you can't. You have no idea. You have no idea, because of the forces off stage who are controlling and manipulating events. You have no idea what they're going to allow and not allow. And, you look around, you see so many people who just sort of fall for their crap. I see people driving down the street still here, in the Detroit area, driving around, in a car by themselves with a face mask on. I'm like, are you afraid you're going to give yourself the Wuhan virus? What the hell are you doing? And, there's just this group of people that the darker forces know they are very easily manipulated, and they just go along with things. Because they're just, I don't know, they're non-thinking. They've been deprived of some sort of critical thinking skills in school or their lives or however they were raised, whatever. And I really don't believe that, for example, the entire nation of Germany were all, let's all kill the Jews. I just think most of them were like, oh, this can't possibly be true, or I don't know, that's what Adolf said. So and they just went along with it. You don't need the whole nation to do anything. You just need a sufficient number of people in the right positions to be able to execute your will, because you're going to run into not resistance, but no resistance when it finally gets to it. And that's how the, evil, wicked men in the church have been so thorough in their destruction of the faith across the entire country for half a century, because you really don't need to have everyone go along with you. You just need most people to not resist you, and that's what it is.
Yeah, and seeing to it that we have so many go along fellows to our masters. And now with the whole COVID thing, and we were all locked down, we were deprived of sacraments. And then when they were opened up, you have to receive in the hand. I don't believe by canon law they could do either, restrict the sacraments or make us receive in the hand. That's correct, right?
That's correct. I mean, the restriction of the sacraments may or may not be, depending on what the question is, might be an area for discussion, but there is, there is absolutely no bishop has any authority to tell you can't receive in the hand. I'm sorry, you can't receive on the tongue. They don't have that authority. They don't. That's universal law in the church. But, now you just hear bishops saying, well, but that's fine. It's universal law, I know, but I'm the guy that makes the law in my diocese, and that's what it is. I'm like, no. Do you understand what the word universal means? And they don't care. There's no accountability for the vast majority of bishops in the country. There's no accountability for them. They know, what's worse is they know there's no accountability for them. Rome is a mess, even if objectively speaking an injustice has been done. There's really no court of appeals to make your case in, or if you are, it takes years to happen. And they know it. So it really is a case of they're holding all the cards, and, to whatever degree you are affected by it is just how you're going to be affected by it. You send your kid to a Catholic school, they're going to lose the faith. You go to most parishes, you're going to become a raging liberal Democrat because of the homilies and everything that's going on. Oh, by the way, you'll know nothing about the faith. You probably knew nothing walking in. You'll know even less walking out. And you're going to walk out as well, because why stay? Eventually, you probably got some soft-minded people who like to sit there and hold hands and have donuts with each other. And, that's good for them. Okay, fine. But most people are going to go, you know what, if I'm a good person, I'm going to heaven. If there is a heaven, if there is a God, if that's all cool, well, why do I have to go there? Or I like them better. They have childcare. So I'm going to go over there. We have our, evangelical roundup volleyball game once a year. And that's nice. So let's go do that. And that's it. I mean, there's the supernatural aspect of the faith as an apologetic and as a catechetical reality has just been destroyed. So why should somebody feel beyond just their own personal psychological, again, they like holding hands and feeling fellowship, aside from that, which is no reason to go to church, go to mass, why should anybody go to mass? I should go to church.
And now that we've been told by all the bishops that, just make a spiritual communion, just make a good act of contrition, whereas, of course, that is important. Of course, that is part of our tradition. That is not the same as receiving the Eucharist and going through the sacrament of confession.
No, not at all. Of course it's not. And, again, I don't think many of the, I just really think most of the hierarchy doesn't really believe in the real presence. If you believe in the real presence, you come out and you say it and you defend it, and all of your actions back it up. Maybe they may not be the most prudent way of expressing something or whatever, but that's all really beside the point. You don't see any evidence anywhere. Zero. I mean, I think two bishops that I can think of even thought of having anything resembling a Eucharistic procession, or heck, for that fact, even putting our Lord in a monstrance by themselves and standing out in front of the church with a deacon and an altar boy or two. There's nothing. So, like, really? But wait a minute. During the Black Plague, there were Eucharistic processions all over the place, right through the most infected parts of Europe's towns and villages, walking right through the contamination and the infection. Here we're like, ooh, Wuhan, ooh, lockdown, put face masks on, you stand 400 feet apart from each other, and, don't only fight, soupage in Chicago. Right now, as we sit here on this interview, right now, on, what's the date, June 16th, 17th, whatever, sitting right here, he has said no more than 10 people in a church. I mean, there's some old churches in Chicago that were built for many hundreds and hundreds of people, some of them thousands. Only 10 people. That's it, 10 people, no more than 10 people. So, I'll tell you, if it isn't a willful destruction of the faith, it sure looks like it.
Yeah. And Michael, do you think that with the precedent that was sent, that the bishops can close Mass just like this, that now in the future they'll be more likely to do that? I would assume that's the case. Or the laity more likely to rise up and say no? Probably not, right? Now they've done it before. They could probably do it again. They have that justification.
Sure. I don't see nothing prevented them this time. So why would they feel something would prevent them next time? And, uh, when you look at sort of the convergence, when you look at the convergence of things happening in the cultural realm as expressed politically and legally, and the convergence of things happening in the spiritual realm as expressed liturgically and educationally and all of this stuff is sort of pouring together in the same pot and really creating a hellish stew. And I think there's uh, uh, I think there will come, probably in short order, certainly if Joe Biden wins, there will come in short order a uh, a complete clampdown on the faith, on the church. Um, you have sort of the legal precedent set up here yesterday in the Supreme Court decision that somehow biological sex is also equal to sexual orientation, or whatever you feel you are from noon to one any given day. I'm a woman, I'm a man, wait, I'm a both, I'm a whatever. Um, to allow somebody to redefine their sex into being whatever they want and then say it's a constitutional right. Okay, you have now set up the clash between First Amendment religious freedom and uh, the not an amendment, but constitutionally guaranteed civil right. Those two forces are going to hit. They're going to hit when now, since that ruling is now there, now the clock has started over at this point. People have been fired from Catholic schools because they were openly gay married or two lesbians or whatever. That was before this ruling of yesterday. Now that this ruling has happened, a new era has dawned. I should say a new night has reached, or a new night has begun. And uh, the first case, and look, these guys know how to operate the mechanisms of power, the court system, and all of that. Been doing it for years, decades. When they say, okay, let's find a test case now. Who's the first teacher that's going to be fired from a Catholic school because he put that he married his boyfriend on his Facebook page? And the bishop or the principal or whoever found out and fired him. Aha. Let's take that case, find a favorable court, plug it in there, and let's get the ball rolling all the way up to the Supreme Court. And you simply cannot have a clash of rights. And if people don't quite understand what I mean by this, okay, right there it says right to life in the founding documents. And a right was invented in Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton. Actually, it was invented in the contraception case in '65. Forgetting the name right now. A right to privacy was invented, which was then added on to in Eisenstadt and then later on in '73 in Roe. But that case established a constitutional right that wasn't mentioned in the Constitution. So here you have the exact same principle at play. You have a right, religious freedom, established in the, right there, it's in plain writing in the Constitution. It's the First Amendment, very First Amendment. And you've made up a right. So now here you have a written down, formalized right there in the founding documents right versus a fabricated right. Clash, the fabricated right wins. That same thing is going to happen here. And when that happens, it is absolutely lights out across the board for any sort of protection of religion in America. And look, these things don't take long to come to fruition. I can't remember the Italian expression. Certainly can't remember Italian because I don't know it. But there is an expression in Italian that says the sooner things or the faster things are approaching their end, the faster they go. So none of this stuff is not going to take years to happen. Anybody who thinks that's, they've obviously been a big supporter of legalizing marijuana because they're high. This is going to take a very short amount of time to happen. There's too much of a desire on the part of the left. They know they have the momentum. The Marxists know they have the momentum. They know that they have, to some degree, if not a supportive public across the board on all of these issues, they at least have an indifferent public in the places that matter most for them to be indifferent. And let's take a look at initial polling and everything, if you can believe the polls. People are completely down with what happened with the Supreme Court yesterday. Because the way it's classed is, it's not what are the effects of that Supreme Court decision. They don't think like that. They think, oh, what happened? Oh, well, what happened was that they said, gays can't be fired because they're gay. That's what they said. Well, that's true. That may be what they said, but what are the effects of it, and how did they reason their way to it? If anybody has a chance to read Justice Kavanaugh's dissenting or Samuel Alito, for that fact's dissenting opinion in that case, they really should read it. But part of me is like, that's good. It's good to know. Maybe tell the grandchildren. But the way this is rolling out is it is accelerating, and it's accelerating at a pace that even I thought it wouldn't move this fast this soon.
Well, like you said, these things happen like this. It'll happen overnight, these kind of changes. All of a sudden, one morning you'll wake up, and boom, it'll all be different. So it's,
there was the case in when Roe v. Wade, when the ruling was handed down in '73, January, obviously 22nd, 1973. If you watch any of the kind of evening newscasts from that day, Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley and those guys who were all the major anchors for the networks in those days, they just read a story as though, we went to the store and bought a bottle of Bang because now they make it in yellow. That's it. They just treated the story as just some kind of matter-of-fact thing, and that was the end of it. And, but the people didn't begin to realize the devastating impact. The forces behind it did, the people who are moving it along. But, look, most people are just disengaged. They've created a society where education is really just indoctrination.
Yes.
And, you've created an entertainment industry to keep everybody, bred in circuses sort of thing, just keep giving them games and stuff like that. I mean, I'm amazed. I don't do it anywhere near as much when I used to do some freelance work for General Motors, but I'm a 2 million miler with Delta, and I'm amazed the number of times I will see grown men, my age men, sitting on a plane playing video games. I'm like, you have nothing better to do with your mind than just sit there, and they'll sit there for hours playing these stupid video games, and not thinking, not reading. Heck, for goodness sake, should be better just take a nap. You're just embedding your brain with idiocy. Don't get me wrong, it's just down for a game here or there as much as anybody, but to just sit there, and because it's so prevalent. You're sitting right beside people, you see what they're doing, and they're just all engaged in it, for hours. They don't care. They're sitting there in the airport playing video games.
Using ourselves to death.
Dude, you're a grown man, for goodness sakes. You're not a 15-year-old. Even that I wouldn't, if I had a 15-year-old son, I'd take it away from him. But, you're a grown man, for goodness sake. Don't you want to have some sort of engagement, some sort of concern about the future of your culture, your society, your nation? And most scarily, you actually can vote. That's even more horrifying. If you want to play video games and disengage from the culture, well then fine, but your vote shouldn't count like mine because you don't care about the culture, I do. So yeah, we are rocketing towards something right now, and I really don't think most people realize, even most good Catholics, because it's a very frightening thing to stare at or stare into, to be like, oh my, this could all come to a screeching end very quickly.
Right, we need Our Lady now more than ever.
Absolutely.
So then, one more positive question. So, who are some of the good shepherds, good bishops, good social media pages? Of course, Church Militant. Who are some of the other people that you would trust to lead the faithful in the right direction?
Of bishops?
Well, you see some bishops on Twitter, some you should follow, some you should not follow. Same thing with priests, same thing with different social media platforms. Who are some of the people that you would point people to?
Well, if I was to look at, various um, uh, bishops' presences in social media, uh, if a bishop isn't going to talk like I just spoke, then I'm not sure why I would follow him. They need to be standing up saying what the deal is. I mean, they have a grace of office. You and I don't have grace of office. We're just lay people, uh, you know. And if we can see it and we can say it, well, certainly you should be saying it, Bishop. And if you're not, then, okay, a range of possibilities open up why you're not saying it. You could be gay and you just like things the way they are. You could be financially corrupt. You could be a coward. You may know all of this, like many people. And say, well, I heard about McCarrick. Didn't say anything. But as he continued raping seminarians, you didn't think that was something, so maybe you raise your head above the crowd and mention. You could be just a completely brainwashed moron about climate change and no borders and all this stuff, rah, 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 Marxist causes. You could have been poorly trained in seminary, so you're malformed yourself. In regards to the specific question you asked me, it doesn't matter which one of those or some combination of them is the reason why, but it is the reason why in a given bishop's page. But if a bishop is not speaking like that, then again, could be any of those reasons, could be something we haven't mentioned, but I wouldn't waste my time. Why? I was struck in the wake of the Supreme Court decision yesterday that this morning, first of all, James Martin cheered it. And let me put a little opposition at play here. James Martin, a priest, felt complete license to come out and cheer that, and gay people are finally being accepted, and blah, 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 and all that and everything. Yeah, because they're so persecuted now. The head of the USCCB, Jose Gomez, the Archbishop of Los Angeles, put out a statement about, this is very remorseful and sad, and we're messing around with the definition of sex and nature, blah, 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 blah. Dude, are you high? You are the presiding archbishop that sits, and not just sits, but actually presides over that LA Religious Education Congress every year. I know he knows who his speakers are, James Martin being one of them. I know because I walked right up to him myself personally, as closer than I am to your screen right now, walked right up to him at that conference, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And I said, you got Father Brian Massengale, who I suspect is gay, who's up there teaching heresy, and he's a speaker at your conference. And I can't remember who the other priest was now at the time. Richard Rohr is here. They're speaking heresy from the stage, and you're allowing it, Archbishop. Said it right to him. And he just stood there and went, oh. And then his secretary grabbed him and they shuffled off. So, excuse me, but I find it a little disingenuous. I think the reason, it's my, suspicious journalistic self. I think the reason he put that statement out was so he could tell all the rich donors who are still think they're Catholic in Los Angeles, because he's trying to raise $500 million for his fund. He already has a $700 million endowment. I'm not quite sure why he needs another $500 million on top of it. I think he just put it out so he could have something to talk about at the cocktail parties. I don't think he cares one way or the other. You've let openly gay priests run around. Brian Massengale, the priest I mentioned to him, has since that time has come out as gay and said, I'm gay and this is it and everything else, and isn't it great, and doesn't my dress look nice on me, and gone right up there again since he came out, and has gone right up there again at last year's Religious Education Congress and come out and said, gay sex is fine and this and that, and everything. Stands with her on the stage saying it. I'm gay, this is fine, everything's good, and Gomez allows it. So, sorry, but your actions in allowing that have nothing to do. They stand in direct contradiction to the words you published yesterday. Who's going to read your statement? I mean, the PR guy for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. You probably didn't even know that he'd issued one, because why would you? So we know, because we're in this business and we see all these things. But these men are sinister. They're sinister. So yeah, frankly, um, Bishop Strickland in Tyler, Texas, puts out good. I guess you might maybe call it kind of rally the troops, sort of tweets. But even there, I think he's somewhat hamstrung, because he realizes he's in a small diocese. It's essentially Tyler, Texas, is a backwater diocese, and he and probably some other bishops in those same situations are thinking, well, I have to try to do as best I can to advance the ball down the field, but I got to be careful not to keep throwing Hail Mary passes and drawing too much attention to myself, because if I do, they'll get rid of me, and then they'll move in some crooked, twisted, gay, thieving, lying bishop, and he'll come in here and destroy whatever good I've been able to start to build. That's an argument. Yeah, I mean, you're going to listen to Bishop Barron with his "everybody goes to heaven" crap. Or Supich with his "we're going to have a revolution in the church and have a paradigm shift," or Tobin, who conspired with the governor of New Jersey to shut the churches down before the governor even said shut the churches down. I mean, where are you going with these guys? So no, I would never go to a bishop's page, and try to get their take on things. I don't need to find out through social media. Holiness has a way of transmitting, and it doesn't need an electronic platform to be able to do it. As far as other sites,
Well, bishops, you tend to see the same people that come out all the time: Burke, Schneider, Vigano. Those you would say would be good sources for the faithful to look to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take a look at when you run into something, an issue like, for example, the SSPX. I think Bishop Schneider has probably gone in a little bit too deeply there. He is the Vatican appointee to try to help restore things or something there. But look, our reporting has revealed just how freaking crooked and homosexualist and cover-up the leadership, including Bishop Fillet, of the SSPX is, the breakaway group. So you can't find common cause with somebody or with a group or an individual. You can't find common cause with them on one thing where you happen to overlap, and then allow the camel's nose under the tent to bring in something that you're actually opposed to because it's opposed to the truth. So it's a difference if you have an overlap in, maybe one group is not given to, I don't know, marching in the streets, and you are, and typically they're more to send out flyers type of people, and you're the more march down the street with your signs type. Okay, if they want to come into your group and hand out flyers to people on the street, okay, so you found common cause, you found this event, you found this narrow slice of movement. But I'm not opposed to somebody handing out flyers. They're not opposed to us marching down the street with signs. So if your tactics are different, that's one thing. But in the case of the SSPX, and people who have come to support them because they look at the church on fire and they turn around and then say, "Oh, these guys are great," you say, well, okay, you found common cause on some areas. Some of those areas being, the horrible stuff going on in what I've called the Church of Nice, the liturgical abuse and all this sort of thing. Okay, that's fine, but when you look at what they're willing to accept, the evil they're willing to accept to advance that ball down the field, well then no, we don't have common cause anymore. We may have a common understanding or agreement on a certain list, a number of bullet points about things, but that doesn't mean we're in the same foxhole. Get out of my foxhole. You guys are child rapists or cover-up artists. I don't want you anywhere near me. I don't care if we do happen to agree that blue's our favorite color each. I don't care. Get the hell away from me. So, I think what this has all exposed these last few years, particularly since McCarrick, but even more so now with the Wuhan stuff and riots and, the racism charges and all this stuff. I think what it's exposed is that the number of solid, across the board, solid, faithful Catholics is a much smaller number than we've ever really thought. Doesn't mean that's neither good nor bad. God kept shrinking the size of the army before it went in and attacked, Jericho, or the Promised Land. Kept shrinking it. Nope, too big. Nope, too big. Get rid of them. Nope, too big. Small, knock them down. They went from 30,000 to 300. So small doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it does. I think a lot of people think in terms of, well, you have to have millions of people who. I honestly don't think. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but 70% of Catholics reject the real presence. I shouldn't say reject, don't believe. Half reject it, half have never heard it. But nonetheless, 70% don't believe it. I'm sure that's probably true in the priesthood and the episcopate as well. I'm sure 70%, if not more, actually probably reject it. Then you get down to, if the 30% still sitting in Mass, how many of them agree with the Church's teaching on contraception? How many of them would go vote for a member of the party of death? I mean, you keep winnowing and winnowing and winnowing and winnowing down, and you're not really left with that many. I would believe of the 70 million Catholics, roughly, there are in the United States, I'd say you probably have, I don't know, somewhere less than 5% who are actually faithful Catholics, who have a devotional life, who believe every last single thing the Church teaches without exception. Would die for the faith, or at least in their minds, they would hope they would be given the grace to die for the faith if they had to. But in the meantime, will suffer for the faith because they realize it's the fullness of the truth. I just don't think there's that many people, baptized Catholics who think that, and that includes, clergy and laity as well. So I don't really know who I would say, because I don't know that across the board of all these different, social media types and all that. All I would say is if it is any way has a website, a personality, an organization, is in any way connected to the institutional church, I would have nothing to do with it, because they're too easily compromised. If they are receiving any benefit for their support of the institutional church, small I, institutional church, I would steer far away from them, because they could be compromised. And that includes Focus, Curtis's Focus group. That would include the National Knights of Columbus, across the board. If these guys are, so to speak, sucking from the teat of the institutional church, I have nothing to do with it, because they may be forced to make a choice, and too many people, when they have to come to make that choice, make the choice for their own benefit and not for the good of the truth. So I would have nothing to do with them.
All right, so let that be a call out to the laity. It's on you. Life's not a spectator sport. You got to get out there and participate.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for everything. All great information. I know they know how to find you. How can people find more of you, Church Militant, St. Michael's people?
Yeah, churchmilitant.com. Just come and look at on any given day, watch any of the reports we have, read any of the articles we have, and we cover all of this. And it's all just meant to be one big gigantic wake up call. I mean, if you don't want to watch us, turn on the news. Your cities are on fire. Your entire electoral process is being robbed and reshaped, stolen from you. With the purpose in mind of essentially installing a Marxist system to kill you. That's the point. You will submit, or you're going to be killed. You may not be killed shoved off to a gulag or whatever they'd call it in America that way, but they want to deprive you of your all of your rights, God-given rights, so that you will not be in opposition to them as they institute full and total control of the state. This has gone on since time immemorial. I don't know why people are so shocked by, that can't possibly happen. Are you out of your minds? Really? Seriously? 100 years ago, 100 years ago, Russia was, a powerful country. There was a czar and there was an emperor, and then in 1 week he was gone. So, it might take a little bit different here because of the technology and the communications, and many more people here have guns and whatever. But, look, there is no evil and no stupidity so deep that the human race cannot stumble into, um, and particularly when it's portrayed as a good. And that's what's going on right now. This evil is being portrayed as a good. Uh, there's evil never has anything good about it. Nothing.
Well, and thank you very much for all that you do and giving the laity and also good people in the Catholic Church a voice when maybe some of our complaints fall on deaf ears. We have a place that we could go with Church Militant. So thank you very much, Michael Voris.
Thank you, Gene. God bless you, man.
God bless you.